Ever feel like, whoa, someone needs to throw a life preserver to my relationship?
Hmm. Tell me more about that feeling.
Like life's throwing all these curveballs, new job, maybe move to a new city, even, the whole starting a family thing, all amazing,
Right?
right?
All big milestones for sure.
But man, they can really rock the boat when it comes to, the relationship.
Yeah, definitely not always smooth sailing.
So today, we're going to do a deep dive on how couples can not only stay afloat during these big transitions, but actually come out stronger on the other side. What do you think?
I think it's a topic a lot of people can relate to. And, it's interesting. We tend to focus on the biggies, right? Marriage, retirement, the works.
Big life changes, yeah.
Right. But often it's the smaller, almost sneaky changes that can really catch us off guard.
Oh, totally. Like what?
Well, let's say you finally decide, okay, it's time, and you pick up that hobby you've been putting off, or you land that dream job, but whoa, suddenly you're working crazy hours.
Oh, for sure, even something like that can throw off the whole routine.
Exactly. These subtle shifts, they might not seem seismic at first, but their impact on a relationship, oh, that can be huge.
Sneaky little things. So, are we talking about stress being the ultimate relationship killer here?
I'd say stress is definitely up there. Think of it this way. You're already navigating a new normal, stress levels are probably high, and suddenly those little things, the minor annoyances, you could usually just brush off.
Right, right.
Yeah, those become like relationship landmines.
Ugh, it's true. I mean, when you're both exhausted, even something like who's unloading the dishwasher can turn into a whole thing.
Exactly. And that's where things can really spiral. Because instead of being each other's support system, you're both on edge, more likely to, I don't know, maybe snap at each other or just completely withdraw.
And not exactly helping you feel closer.
Not at all. In fact, that's often when couples I work with start to feel that distance creeping in.
That whole, we're in this together, but also, are we drifting apart? Feeling,
Oh.
ugh, the worst.
It's incredibly common, though. And it's important to remember that this is a human response to stress and change. It doesn't necessarily spell doom for the relationship.
Okay, well, that's reassuring. But we can't just, ignore it and hope for the best, can we?
Definitely not. This is where communication and like really good communication becomes absolutely crucial.
And what does that look like, especially in the middle of all this change?
Well, it's not just about talking, right? It's about really truly understanding each other's perspectives, each other's needs and anxieties. It's about active listening.
Because sometimes, let's be real, you can hear the words, but it's not really sinking in, you know what I mean?
100%. Active listening is key. It's about like putting aside your own thoughts for a minute and really trying to step into your partner's shoes. And on the flip side, it's about being super clear and upfront about your own needs and feelings.
Because as much as we wish it were true, our partners can't actually read our minds.
Exactly. They might be amazing, but they're not mind readers, unfortunately.
So true. But honestly, how do you even make time for these deep dives into each other's emotional landscapes when you're already juggling a million things?
It's funny. It's almost never about finding more time. It's more about making the time you do have really count.
Okay, so how do we do that?
Well, even just 15 minutes before bed, right? Phones down, completely present with each other. Honestly, it can make a world of difference.
Those little pockets of connection, right?
Exactly. And don't be afraid to think outside the box. Maybe it's a quick walk together after dinner, even just tackling a chore together while you chat. Just those little moments.
It really is amazing how much those little things can actually help.
Yeah.
But it feels like sometimes, on top of everything else, those roles we have in the relationship, they kind of start to, I don't know, shift a little during a big transition.
Oh, absolutely. It makes sense, right? Like,
Yeah.
picture this. One partner, they land this awesome promotion.
Okay, so excited.
Right. Huge win. But then, bam, longer hours, way more responsibility at work. You're totally brain fried by the end of the day. And guess what? The other partner, they're kind of stuck picking up the slack at home.
Yeah, and that can't feel good for anyone.
Right. And that's where things can get kind of messy. Because if you're not super careful, resentment can start to build up on both sides.
And then it's like, forget those little connection points, right?
Exactly. It's like all that good communication we were just talking about, that open and honest back and forth, that becomes even more important, like way more vital.
So how do we do that? Like, how do you actually have those conversations about, chores and who's doing what without it turning into a fight when you're both already stressed?
It's tough, for sure. But one thing I always tell people is try using I statements. Like instead of saying, ooh, you're always working late, try something like, hey, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed with everything at home when you're working late. Can we talk about it?
So it's more about, working together to figure it out,
Mhm.
not blaming each other.
Yes, exactly. It's not about keeping score or, winning. You're on the same team, remember? The goal is to find a way to share the load in a way that feels fair to both of you.
Right, because it's like those expectations we had about our roles, like pre-transition, those probably aren't going to work anymore.
Yeah, you gotta be willing to adapt, to be flexible, especially when things are changing so fast.
Which is hard.
It is. But, sometimes those transitions, as hard as they are, they can also force us to try new things. Like we step outside our comfort zones and maybe even surprise ourselves.
Oh, I love that. So it's like, don't just survive the changes. Use them to learn and grow, both individually and as a couple.
Yes, exactly. And remember this, you don't have to go through it alone. Sometimes bringing in some outside support can be a game changer.
What do you mean? Like calling your best friend at 2 a.m.?
Well, that could help too, huh? But I'm thinking more like a therapist or a counselor, maybe even a trusted family member or mentor,
Yeah.
someone who can offer a fresh perspective on things.
It's like having a coach in your corner.
Uh,
I like it. Okay, so we've talked communication, we've talked flexibility, support systems, but what about shared goals? It seems like those could get kind of lost in the shuffle when everything else is changing so much.
Totally get that. It's easy to feel like you're on two different paths, Especially when life is pulling you in opposite directions. And that's exactly why it's so important to hit pause for a second, reconnect with each other, and really revisit your shared vision for the future. Where do you both want to go?
It's true, when everything else feels kind of shaky, those big dreams we have, those can really keep you anchored.
Totally. And, it doesn't have to be overwhelming. We're not talking about tackling those huge life goals all at once. It's more about breaking them down into bite-sized pieces.
Smaller
Right.
steps you can actually wrap your head around.
Exactly. And then those smaller steps, you can start working on those together.
So it's more about figuring it out as you go, like
Yeah.
being open to adjusting those goals if you need to.
100%. It's about being flexible, adapting as needed. And hey, don't forget to celebrate those little wins along the way. Like, did you finally manage to stick to that new budget you talked about?
Even with all the extra pressure of, everything else going on.
Exactly. That's huge. High five for teamwork. Or, hey, maybe you finally found a babysitter you trust so you can actually have a date night, like a real date night.
Those are big wins.
They are. So break out the sparkling juice, celebrate those moments, no matter how small they might seem.
I love that. Finding those bright spots, even in the middle of all the chaos.
It makes all the difference.
Yeah.
And speaking of finding those good vibes, can we talk about gratitude for a sec?
Oh, I love that you brought that up.
It sounds so simple, right? But honestly, in the thick of it, when you're stressed and everything feels like too much, it's way too easy to get stuck focusing on what's not working. All the frustrations and anxieties.
Then there.
Right. But even just taking a minute, just a small pause to appreciate each other, to really show your partner you're grateful for them, for their love, for their support, even for, I don't know, just doing the dishes without being asked, that can really shift things in a big way.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
It's like, what's that saying? What you focus on expands. So if you're only focusing on all the negative stuff, well, guess what? That's just going to grow bigger.
Right. But if you're making a conscious effort to appreciate the good, those little wins, those moments of joy, those little things your partner does that make you smile, well, that can completely change the whole dynamic.
I'm all about that.
Me too. And before we wrap things up here, can I just say one more thing?
Of course, go for it.
Navigating those big life changes as a couple, it's like, okay, picture running a marathon, right? Not a sprint, but a marathon. There are going to be moments where you feel amazing, like you're on top of the world. And then there are going to be other moments where you're just like, oh man, what are we doing? I can't take another step.
So true.
But the important thing is you're in it together, every step of the way. And even when things get tough, when you feel lost or alone, just remember you got your teammate right there beside you. You just got to reach out, grab their hand, and keep moving forward one step at a time.
I love that visual.
Mm.
Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, right? Having each other's backs, offering grace and understanding, even when it's hard, and remembering that no matter what life throws your way, you're on the same team. So as we wrap up this deep dive today, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
What's one small but really meaningful thing you can do today to show your partner you care? Maybe it's a simple thank you. Maybe it's taking on an extra chore. Or maybe it's just looking them in the eye and saying, I love you, just because. Those small acts of love, those little gestures, those are the things that really add up. Those are the things that build that strong, unshakable foundation, the kind that can weather any storm.